You know, the secrets to building amazing, high-performing teams, they're not always where you think. We're not starting in some fancy Silicon Valley boardroom today. Nope. Our journey begins in a gritty, inner-city boxing gym in Manchester.
And this is where we meet Professor Damian Hughes. See, his whole understanding of culture, it didn't come from a textbook. It came from real life. His childhood playground was actually his dad's boxing gym. And this place, it was more than just a gym. It was an environment where everyone, and I mean everyone, felt safe and respected the second they walked through the door.
So here's what's so fascinating. The sign on the door said boxing club, right? But get this, Hughes figures that a whopping 90% of the people there never, ever stepped into a ring. They weren't there to fight. They were there for something else entirely, the culture. It was like this accidental masterclass in how to build a real community. So what was the secret sauce? What made it so powerful? Well, the gym had this really clear cultural code. It was a sanctuary, sure, a place where everyone felt like they belonged, but the really crucial part, that last point, non-negotiable behaviors. For instance, you couldn't use bad language, and it wasn't about being polite or anything. It was about discipline. The thinking was, hey, if you can't even control your tongue, how are you going to control the bigger stuff in your life? And that simple idea, having clear, non-negotiable behaviors, that's a cornerstone of any high-performing team, whether it's in a boxing gym or a boardroom.
So this whole experience in the gym actually pushed Hughes to look into the academic research. And what he found was that pretty much any organization, a sports team, a tech company, you name it, falls into one of 5 distinct types of culture. So let's dive in and break these down, shall we?
All right, first up, we've got the star culture. You know the type. A company just throws a ton of money at the so-called best talent. The rock star developers, the superstar sales folks, and then just kind of sits back and waits for the magic. But what's the problem? Well, as one coach put it perfectly, everyone wants to be the head waiter, but nobody wants to wash the dishes. It's a recipe for failure when all the egos are focused on the glory and nobody wants to do the grunt work.
Okay, next up, the autocracy culture. This one's all about a single person. Think of a charismatic founder or a super dominant coach. Their way is the highway. And look, it can work. It can move mountains, but it's super risky. What happens if that one leader makes a bad call or just leaves? The whole thing can just fall apart.
Then there's the bureaucratic culture. Oh boy, this is the land of endless rules, policies, and decisions by committee. It's safe, I guess. It's predictable, but it is painfully slow. It can't adapt to change, and trying to get anything done feels like wading through thick mud. So frustrating.
Number 4 is the engineering culture. And hey, this isn't just for software engineers. It's any place that hires people with super deep but really narrow expertise. The big problem here? It creates silos. You get these little fiefdoms, right? Different departments or teams that are basically on their own islands, sometimes even competing against each other. It just kills collaboration.
And that finally brings us to the 5th and by far the most powerful type, the commitment culture. It's actually built on 2 really simple ingredients. That's it. First, a clear purpose. Everyone knows why they exist. And second, a clear set of behaviors that everyone, from the top dog to the newest hire, agrees to live by and, importantly, holds each other accountable for.
And the results? Honestly, they're staggering. We're talking decades of research here. On average, these commitment cultures consistently outperform every other type by 22%. And that's not just on one thing. It's across pretty much every metric that matters: profit, market share, keeping your best people around. So this isn't just some fluffy feel-good idea. It is a massive, massive competitive advantage.
Okay, so how do you actually build one of these? Well, the absolute key, is to focus on behaviors, not just vague, abstract values. Why? Because ambiguity is the ultimate enemy of a great culture. And if you have a value that isn't backed up by real behavior, it can become what Hughes calls a cultural albatross.
Let's just break that down. A value, that's an internal belief, right? It's personal, it's inside your head. But a behavior, that's an external action. You can see it, you can observe it. It is the living, breathing proof of what you actually believe. It's the difference between just saying you believe in something and actually showing it. And here's a story that just illustrates this perfectly. Hughes talks about the CEO who was always going on about how his company was a meritocracy, how everyone was equal. Sounds great, right? Well, right outside the front door were reserved parking spots just for senior leaders. That one tiny little detail created this massive contradiction, because at a basic gut level, we just don't follow hypocrites. And that silly parking spot policy, it became this albatross that hung around the company's neck, just destroying all trust. All right, so we've spent some time on team culture. Now let's switch gears a bit. Let's pivot from the organization down to you, the individual. And it all starts with this one fundamental question, a question we've all been asked, one that really shapes how we think about ourselves.
Think back to when you were a kid. We're all taught to think about intelligence like it's this fixed thing. You either have or you don't. How clever are you? That question puts us all on this single linear scale, and honestly, it leaves a lot of people feeling like they just don't measure up.
But what if that's the completely wrong question to be asking? Let's take that whole idea and just flip it completely on its head, because there's a much more powerful way to look at this.
This is the real game changer. The idea comes from the psychologist Howard Gardner. And the question isn't, how clever are you? It's, how are you clever? See the difference? It totally shifts the focus from one single metric to the idea of multiple intelligences. We're all gifted, just in totally different ways. Maybe you're socially brilliant, or musically talented, or physically gifted. The goal isn't to be clever, it's to figure out how you're clever and then lean into that.
Okay, so once you figure out your unique brand of cleverness, how do you stay on top of your game, especially when things get tough? Well, Professor Hughes has his own 3 non-negotiable behaviors for this. First is kindness, and that starts with being kind to yourself. Second is fun. You've got to find something that excites you or delights you in what you do. And third is making a positive contribution, bringing something to the table that really makes a difference.
All right, let's talk about our brains for a second. Did you know that research suggests we spend something like 95% of our day on autopilot, just using these mental shortcuts to get by? And look, most of the time, that works just fine. But what happens when it doesn't? When we get stuck in a bad pattern, we need a way to snap out of it.
And there's a brilliant technique for this called a tripwire. So what is it? A tripwire is basically just a pre-planned signal that you set up for yourself. Its only job is to break that automatic pattern, to snap you out of that knee-jerk reaction. It gives you that split second you need to just pause, think, and then deliberately choose how you want to respond.
Here's a perfect real-world example. There was a guy whose phone calls with his ex-wife always ended up being toxic. The trigger? Just seeing her name pop up on his phone. His automatic response was this feeling of, ugh, here we go again. So he set a tripwire. He went into his contacts and edited her name. He just added 3 words after it. Calm, polite, confident. Now whenever she called, that little prompt was just enough to break his autopilot and remind him of the person he wanted to be in that conversation.
It's such a simple idea, but it's an incredibly powerful way to take back control over your own reactions. It helps you stop just reacting on autopilot and start responding with real intention. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. What's one automatic pattern in your life that you'd like to change, and what tripwire are you going to set today to make that happen?